Benjamin Thibodeau stood in knee-deep marsh water. Behind him, his processing shed still smoldered. In his weathered hands was a Louisiana State Senate resolution, its seal catching the morning light. Across the pond, Catherine Vandermeer had both hands clamped to her mouth, her eyes wide with dawning horror. Behind her, Senator Ellis Beaumont stepped out of a state vehicle, flanked by 2 Louisiana State police officers. The senator adjusted his cufflink and surveyed the ruined farm with a grim set to his jaw. The resolution in Benjamin's hand wasn't just paper. It was a reckoning born from ash and crawfish poison. Catherine's lips moved soundlessly, her pink linen blouse a garish stain against the gray swamp backdrop. Behind her, the troopers exchanged a glance, then looked toward the senator, waiting for his signal. Benjamin didn't move. He just held the resolution higher, as if offering it to the sunlight for the whole marsh to see. For 1 second, the only sound was the lapping of water against the dead crawfish floating belly up. 5 months before the fire, Benjamin Thibodeau's farm was the heart of Louisiana's crawfish world.
18% of Louisiana's boil supply comes from these ponds. Ain't just a living, it's a legacy.
His processing shed hummed day and night, sending sacks of crawfish to festivals across the state. That same month, Catherine Vandermeer closed on a Mediterranean-style house in the brand-new subdivision bordering Benjamin's land.
I've already identified our first priority, those disgusting pests infesting the water behind our property.
Benjamin, unloading his boat, had no idea his new neighbor had just declared war on his entire way of life. A neighbor at the association meeting raised a hand and reminded Catherine the farm had been there for decades.
That doesn't mean we have to tolerate the smell and the insects.
But Catherine wasn't just complaining. She'd already started drafting violation notices. Benjamin's first notice would arrive 3 days later, printed on HOA letterhead, full of northern condescension. Benjamin tore open the envelope on his porch. The HOA seal felt like an accusation. You are in violation of Section 4.2, harboring vermin and creating a public nuisance. Cease and desist or face fines of $200 per day.
$200 a day. That's a mortgage payment. She's out of her mind. She's out of her mind.
2 weeks later, Benjamin walked into the HOA meeting still wearing his rubber boots.
Mr. Thibodeau, your swamp is lowering our property values. Either clean it up or we will.
That swamp provides 18% of the crawfish for every boil in the state. It's not going anywhere.
Then we'll see you in court. I have lawyers on retainer.
A week later, a certified demand letter arrived, threatening a civil suit and mounting legal fees.
She's trying to suffocate this place with paper, and she's barely getting started.
Benjamin paid the first fine under protest, but something in his chest hardened. This fight was just beginning. Catherine didn't stop at fines. She printed a glossy fact sheet claiming the crawfish ponds were breeding bacteria.
I am protecting our families from a public health crisis.
3 nights later, Benjamin's security camera caught a figure creeping toward his east pond. Sheriff Dupree arrived at dawn. Benjamin handed him a cup of coffee and the footage. At an emergency HOA meeting, Catherine's neighbors demanded answers, but she only offered silence. Behind closed doors, Catherine was on the phone with her attorneys, spinning the footage as a deep fake. Benjamin had a clear shot of her face on the recording, but the sheriff said it wasn't enough for an arrest.
Son, that video alone won't stand in court without a witness. A good lawyer will call it circumstantial.
Benjamin didn't argue. He just walked out of the meeting and drove straight to a surveillance supply store. From that night, every light on the farm stayed on. Catherine had just declared war on a man with nothing left to lose. At 2 in the morning, Catherine Vandermeer cut through the cypress shadows carrying a red gas can and a jug of industrial pesticide. She unscrewed the cap and splashed accelerant across the dry cypress boards of the processing shed, then struck a match. Benjamin woke to the crackle of flames. Barefoot, he sprinted toward the orange glow, already swallowing his livelihood. He reached the shed just as the roof collapsed, the heat slamming him backward into the mud. While he was on his knees, Catherine was 50 yards away, tipping the poison into the east pond. Benjamin didn't see her. He only saw the dead crawfish floating to the surface at first light. They weren't just dead, they were discolored, chemical burns visible where the water had turned cloudy white.
Grandpa, I am sorry.
His phone buzzed with an emergency alert, but there was nothing to salvage. 3 miles away, Catherine showered off the smoke. In the mirror, her reflection looked like someone who'd finally won. A 3-alarm fire crew arrived in time to save the pond pumps, but the processing shed was already gone.
You saw the footage. She was out here last week. Now my farm is ash.
The forensic team lifted a clean partial print from a gas can lid found in the mud.
Mrs. Vandermeer, your prints are on a gas can found at a crime scene. Care to explain?
I've never touched a gas can in my life. This is a setup by that crawfish fanatic.
Benjamin called Jenna Marino, a reporter who'd grown up in the bayou and knew what the farm meant. Her news van was on site within the hour, satellite dish raised above the ruined ponds. That night, the story led every broadcast. Crawfish war. HOA chair accused of arson. Catherine's attorney issued a denial, calling the evidence circumstantial and politically motived. But the footage and the prints were already burning through social media. Louisiana was waking up. Jenna Marino's report crossed 3 million views in 12 hours, picking up national syndication at the state capitol. Senator Ellis Beaumont watched the broadcast with his chief of staff, then picked up the phone.
Senator, I don't know what to say, thank you.
Across town, Catherine stared at the same broadcast, her face hardening. She speed-dialed her crisis management firm.
This was a tragic pest control accident. I deeply regret the damage, but I wasn't responsible. That farmer has been targeting me for months. This is a witch hunt.
But online, the hashtag number Justice for Benjamin was trending. Louisiana crawfish lovers were furious. Benjamin watched the rally of support form on his phone, still standing in his ruined pond. Senator Beaumont issued a statement promising a full legislative inquiry into the attack on Louisiana's agricultural heritage. Catherine's press conference ended with shouted questions she couldn't answer. The net was closing. 2 days later, Senator Beaumont walked the scorched ground of Benjamin's farm, his shoes sinking into the ash.
I've seen storm damage, Mr. Thibodeau. This is something else entirely.
On the farmhouse porch, the senator leaned forward and made a promise.
I am introducing an emergency resolution. This isn't a local dispute anymore. It's a matter of state heritage.
The Senate Agriculture Committee convened the following week. Cameras lined the walls. Benjamin walked to the witness chair in his cleanest flannel, hands rough from years of pulling traps.
I didn't just lose crawfish. I lost the same water my grandfather waded in 60 years ago. That's what she took.
The committee members, many of whom had grown up at crawfish boils, sat in silence.
We'll draft the resolution tonight. This committee will send a message that Louisiana does not tolerate this.
A legislative aide began typing the resolution at midnight. Catherine Vandermeer's name would be in the preamble. Catherine's crisis manager proposed a full counteroffensive. Paint Benjamin as a negligent farmer who poisoned his own water.
He's been dumping chemicals for years. The state should investigate him.
Benjamin opened a text an hour later. Drop the resolution or you'll regret it. The next morning, 200 crawfish farmers and supporters gathered on the Capitol steps, chanting Benjamin's name.
This resolution will pass, and that woman will face justice.
I am the victim of a political witch hunt.
The threat was printed in block letters on a torn piece of paper, slipped under his door while he slept. Your farm wasn't enough. Next time it's you.
Let her try. I ain't backing down.
The rally stretched into the afternoon, the crowd refusing to leave until the resolution was voted on. Inside the Capitol, Senator Beaumont's phone buzzed with a message. The resolution vote was scheduled for the next morning. The Louisiana Senate chamber fell silent as the clerk read the emergency resolution's title.
I call for a vote of conscience. Who will stand with Louisiana's heritage?
The ayes rose like a tide. The resolution passed 38-0. That evening, Governor Julian Landry addressed the state from his desk. The resolution framed beside him.
What happened on that farm was an assault on the soul of Louisiana. We will not let it stand.
The next morning, the state agricultural prosecutor filed 22 criminal counts against Catherine Vandermeer. Sheriff Dupree served the papers personally. News cameras caught Catherine standing in her doorway, pink blouse rumpled, reading the charges.
This is absurd. I am the victim.
By noon, social media had christened her Crawfish Karen. She was a statewide pariah before her trial even began. Benjamin watched the broadcast from his farmhouse porch. Justice was inching closer, but he knew the fight was far from over. 3 days after the resolution, Senator Beaumont summoned Benjamin to a private room in the Capitol.
We're introducing the Bayou Heritage Protection Act. It'll shield Crawfish farms from HOA attacks permanently. I want your name on it.
My name. My grandpa's fight. This could protect thousands of families for generations. I'll do it. But not just for me. For every crawfish farmer who's ever been told their way of life don't matter.
At the press conference, Senator Beaumont held the bill aloft beside Benjamin, cameras flooding the chamber.
This so-called Heritage Act is nothing but legislative revenge. It's a mockery of justice.
But polls showed 81% of Louisianans backed the bill. Support rallies erupted in every parish. Benjamin toured the state with the senator, telling his story in parish halls, his voice raw but steady. Catherine filed motions to delay her trial, but the legislature was no longer waiting for a courtroom. Benjamin watched the legislative session from the gallery, the final vote approaching. He was no longer just a farmer. The Senate Agriculture Committee hearing drew every major news outlet. Expert witnesses filed in, ready to testify. An economist projected the damage. Crawfish farming contributed over $300 million to the state economy. This bill wasn't just symbolic. Benjamin rose to speak. His voice, gravelly and low, filled the chamber.
You can burn a shed and poison a pond, but you cannot burn a culture. Protect the crawfish, protect us all.
The committee voted swiftly. The full Senate passed the Bayou Heritage Protection Act 36-2. 2 days later, Catherine's attorney argued for dismissal in a pretrial hearing, citing prosecutorial overreach. The judge studied the evidence. The gas can, the footage, the trace chemicals. No legal trick could erase them. Motion denied. The trial would proceed. Catherine slumped in her chair, her veneer cracking for the first time. A trial date was set for 6 weeks out. Outside the courthouse, Benjamin faced the cameras with red-rimmed eyes. He never mentioned Catherine's name. He only spoke about the coming harvest, about the law, about the legacy. The trial opened in a packed courtroom. The prosecutor began with Catherine's own HOA threats, then called the first witness. The gas can was wheeled in on an evidence cart. Forensics matched the residue to Catherine's gardening gloves.
I didn't just lose a shed. I lost the whole crawfish season. The whole community lost their boil supply.
Meanwhile, in the Louisiana House, the Bayou Heritage Protection Act reached final debate. The speaker called for a voice vote. Back in court, Catherine's attorney cross-examined Benjamin, trying to paint him as a disgruntled farmer. The prosecutor played the security footage. The jury leaned forward as Catherine's silhouette crept toward the pond. Catherine took the stand. Her answers were clipped, contradictory. The prosecution had her credit card receipts for the pesticide. In the House chamber, the IAs thundered. The Bayou Heritage Protection Act passed by a landslide. The jury withdrew to deliberate. Outside the courthouse, Benjamin embraced Senator Beaumont. Catherine stared at the jury door. For the first time, she said nothing. The jury filed back in at 4 p.m. The foreperson held a single sheet of paper. On all 22 counts of arson, criminal mischief, and agricultural terrorism, the jury found Catherine Vandermeer guilty. Catherine's legs gave out. She grabbed the defense table, her face a mask of disbelief. 2 hours later, Governor Landry signed the Bayou Heritage Protection Act in a ceremony bathed by camera flashes.
With this pen, we declare Louisiana's crawfish farms cultural assets protected by law.
Benjamin shook the governor's hand, then turned toward the cameras with the same calm, seething look he'd worn in the marsh. The new law cited the Vandermeer case by name in its preamble. Her legacy was permanent. Every news outlet ran the same split image. Benjamin holding the resolution, Catherine in handcuffs in the background. The headlines called it the Crawfish Conviction. But in every parish, people just called it justice. Benjamin walked out of the capital alone that night, his grandfather's deed folded in his pocket. And for the first time in months, he breathed deep. 3 weeks later, Catherine Vandermeer stood before a judge for the final time in a beige jumpsuit. The judge sentenced her to the maximum. 15 years in prison and $750,000 in restitution. Catherine was led away in handcuffs without a word, her face a blank canvas of defeat. That afternoon, Benjamin stepped to a microphone on the Capitol steps with Senator Beaumont by his side.
This victory belongs to Louisiana, to every family that lifts a crawfish out of the water.
Senator Beaumont announced a statewide fundraiser to rebuild Benjamin's farm, and within hours donations flooded in. Donations poured in from crawfish festivals, boil houses, and parish fairs across the state. Crawfish farmers pledged labor and materials. The community was restoring what one woman had destroyed.
It won't bring back Grandpa's original shed, but it'll bring back the crawfish. That's enough.
Construction on the new processing shed began that week with a plaque that read, "Built by Louisiana." 3 months later, the new processing shed gleamed under the Louisiana sun. The ponds were full again. Inside, the conveyors hummed as the first crawfish of the season tumbled into sorting bins. Benjamin waded into the east pond and lifted a trap. The crawfish were thick and healthy.
Look at that. Best harvest in years.
That weekend, the farm hosted a crawfish boil that drew families from 3 parishes. Senator Beaumont stood at the head table, cracking claws and laughing with truckers and shrimpers. A banner read, "Bayou Strong," above the new shed. Children ran through the grass with red-stained fingers. Benjamin watched from the levee, his boots muddy, his chest full. The Bayou Heritage Protection Act was already being taught in law schools. Catherine's name was a footnote, but here, in the smoke and laughter, Benjamin Thibodeau was just a farmer again. That fall, PBS aired a documentary titled Bayou Protectors, chronicling Benjamin's fight and the new law. The final segment showed Benjamin walking his grandchildren through the Capitol Rotunda. Framed under glass, the Bayou Heritage Protection Act bore the signature of the governor and the weight of history.
See those names? That's your great-grandpa's fight right there.
The youngest traced her finger over the preamble, past Catherine Vandermeer's name without pausing. 3 months later, Catherine appeared before the parole board, her blonde hair gone gray. The board denied her release, citing the severity of the arson and the enduring harm to the crawfish industry. Catherine's face crumpled, then hardened. She turned from the glass without a word.
Some folks think crawfish are just pests. But we know better, don't we?
Back on the farm, Benjamin unfolded his grandfather's deed and set it beside the new law. 2 documents, same promise. As he refolded the deed, a yellowed envelope slipped from behind the leather binding, addressed in his grandfather's handwriting. "Protect this water, son. It ain't just mud and crawfish. It's blood. Don't ever let them take it."
He'd kept that promise. Even when the fire took everything, he'd held on.
Benjamin carried the letter outside as the sun sank below the cypress line, the sky bleeding orange and pink. His rubber boots sank into the same mud his grandfather had worked 60 years before.
They tried to burn it. They tried to poison it. But it's still here. I am still here. We did it, Grandpa.
The marsh answered with the croak of frogs and the distant hum of the new processing shed. He folded the letter carefully and slipped it into his chest pocket, next to the deed.
The water remembers. So do I.
The next spring, the Louisiana Crawfish Festival unfurled under a bright sky, the largest turnout in its 40-year history. Benjamin was called to the main stage, where Senator Beaumont held a crystal plaque etched with a single word, heritage. The crowd rose to their feet before the senator could finish the introduction. The ovation lasted nearly a minute.
I am just a farmer. But what we do, it's about our way of life. It's about who we are, and no one can take that.
He set the plaque down on the stage and gestured toward the endless tables of boiling crawfish spread across the fairgrounds. Thousands of pounds of crawfish had been donated by farms across the state, a show of solidarity that stretched from Shreveport to Grand Isle.
This was always bigger than one farm. It's about everyone who's ever pulled a trap.
Families gathered around newspaper-covered tables, the air thick with cayenne and lemon.
Grab a plate. There's enough for everyone.
And for the first time, the festival banner read not just a town name, but a name that had become law. Thibodeau. 6 months later, the Southern Law Review published an article calling it the Vandermeer Precedent. Within weeks, Mississippi and Arkansas introduced their own versions of the Heritage Protection Act. Benjamin received an invitation to keynote the National Agricultural Heritage Conference in St. Louis.
You don't need a suit to protect what you love. You just need a reason to fight.
A national agricultural magazine put his portrait on the cover, the face of heritage protection. Inside, the article detailed how one woman's arson had permanently altered agricultural law across the South. Law schools in 4 states added the case to their property law curriculum. Catherine's name appeared in textbooks. Benjamin read a letter from a crawfish farmer in Texas who wrote, "Your fight gave us our own law. Thank you."
One act of hatred turned into a shield for 1,000,000 livelihoods. That's the kind of justice you can't measure in years.
By year's end, the Federal Department of Agriculture was drafting guidelines based on the Bayou Heritage Protection Act. On a mild October morning, a small crowd gathered at the edge of Benjamin's farm for the marker dedication. The bronze plaque cited the Bayou Heritage Protection Act and, in etched letters, the name Catherine Vandermeer. Benjamin's youngest grandson tugged his sleeve and pointed at the words.
That woman tried to wipe us out. Instead, her name's right here, forever reminding folks what we protect.
A photographer asked the family to pose behind the marker, the rebuilt processing shed gleaming in the background. Benjamin wrapped an arm around his grandchildren, the plaque between them.
This is why we fight. Not for revenge. For the next generation.
The eldest granddaughter, no more than 10, read the plaque aloud, stumbling only over the legal Latin. Benjamin corrected her gently, then told the story one more time, as if planting it in the soil. Later, when the crowd had gone, Benjamin stood alone before the marker, the sunset casting long shadows across his grandfather's fields. Have you ever dealt with an HOA from hell? Drop your story in the comments below. And if this story reminded you that regular folks can win, hit that subscribe button. We've got more stories like this, about people who fought back and changed the law. Now, let's take one last look at Benjamin's farm, where the water remembers and the crawfish are thriving. The drone pulls back over the green ponds and cypress trees, the new shed a bright dot in the golden light. Benjamin's silhouette walks the levee, a man who lost everything and built it back with the help of an entire state. Catherine Vandermeer's name is carved in legal history, but Benjamin's legacy is alive in every crawfish boil. The sun sets behind the bayou and the screen fades to black. Thanks for watching. See you in the next story. Keep your receipts, all of them.